about a lot, and what the new insight is to try to change that culture. Here's one summary. This is something I wrote for the Holdsworth Foundation years ago. That there's the kind of conventional culture on the right, which is what I've called the culture of compliance. And Jennifer Porter from OnRamps helped name. She came up with that name, culture of compliance. And we want to contrast that with what we're calling a culture of learning, which is a way in which we can kind of harness young people's sensitivity to status and respect and make it feel like an honor for embracing your difficulty and overcoming challenge. So the big question is, teachers hear this and they say, now I want to do culture of learning. But then all of a sudden there's a new realization. This feels daunting. If it feels like all of society has been doing culture of compliance and now I have to fight against it, is it going to feel new? And also, does culture of learning feel like too many things? Like, this is only 4 rows, but they're all vague, and how do I do it? What we try to do is to simplify and say, look, aim for the mix of rigor and support. And this isn't just my framework. Turns out researchers in almost every field, parenting, leadership, business, management, teaching, have come up with a version of this 2x2. And we want to be in the high intellectual rigor category, where we're asking you to examine your mistakes, examine your misconceptions, revise them, think like a scientist, whatever it is. But in a supportive community in which all students are asked to do that, and all students are supported to do that. Yep. And support can take on many dimensions. It could be flexibility on logistics, or it could be a caring teacher. It could be just clarifying, I'm taking you seriously as a person, right? So I think the simple practical takeaway, point 2, is to aim for high rigor, high support. That's going to lead to a culture of learning. It's going to come across as respectful because you're taking young people seriously. If you just have the rigor and not the support, then kids think that your class is like being at Six Flags, being told that you have to be this tall to ride the ride, and you're not this tall, so see you later. You go ride the teacup, right? So the first step of actually helping teachers do this was to simplify it to this kind of framework. The second step is, how do you then train and influence teachers? Well, we could get into pre-service training and certification. That's something we're thinking about. But there are a lot of teachers in schools right now. And frankly, those teachers, on average, we find in surveys, feel anxious, overwhelmed, under attack. It feels like we're putting our entire culture war on a teacher that is already underpaid and underappreciated and under-resourced. And unfortunately, if you look at conventional models of teacher change, so how would you conventionally try to move teachers from culture of compliance to culture of learning? The results are really like not promising. So tons of research by Matt Kraft, coming out of the Research Partnership for Professional Learning, suggests that conventional PD rarely lasts and rarely transfers. The most common result of conventional PD is teachers end up with a binder of things they feel guilty about not doing that sits on a desk or a shelf. Teacher evaluation systems. So having kind of incentive-tied evaluation systems in which you're supposed to give formative feedback when deciding on evaluation scores ends up giving teachers very low-quality feedback, and in a new paper by Matt Kraft has exactly a null effect. So there's been no improvement in teaching from about 20 years worth of improvements, supposed improvements in a teacher evaluation systems. Teacher coaching can be really effective, but it's highly variable. And anyone who played Little League sports knows sometimes you get a great coach, sometimes you get a terrible coach. And often it's the terrible coach that makes you want to never do something again. And last, a lot of you are talking about AI virtual coaching, and we're doing a lot of that with Stanford and so on. But even if you have a great tool, how do you get teachers to sit down and use it in light of all the other things on their plate? Lots of other challenges for culture of learning. What practices are there? How would you measure them? How do you change teachers? Our pass at this is a teacher fellowship model. This is what I'm going to end with. But this is point 3, the new paradigm. Before I get into the details, our basic philosophy is that instead of trying to replace teachers with technology or with 22-year-old tutors that are going to do the job of teachers instead, let's honor and value and elevate the profession and actually give people the tools that they need to meet that higher standard we're going to ask of the teachers. So it's basically treat teachers with the same kind of culture of learning that we want them to be creating in their classrooms. Mm-hmm. And so what our philosophy led to is a model in which teachers are fellows for 1 to 3 years. They get a letter nominating them from their administrator. Although, ideally we have all teachers do it. We don't want it to just limit to the highest performing teachers. But it still feels like they're known and seen by their admin. They get training institutes of the science of engagement, which they tend to really like. We bring them to Austin. There's an open bar. We give everybody Yetis, t-shirts. Like, it's a great time. But they also learn a lot. And then they get monthly virtual coaching from really high quality Texas public school teachers. And critically, we give them a stipend because they're fellows. We ask them to be creators, not just receivers of information. And they present in a showcase. So it's almost like teacher culture of learning science fair, where at the end of the year, here's what I tried in my classroom. Here's the evidence. Here's what seemed to work. Now let's share it with other teachers. We ended up in this place because first, a dissatisfaction with how young people are treated in our culture, in our math classes. To know, not to blame any individuals, it's just how our culture's always done it.
Right.
And we're lucky that we've identified a better way, the culture of learning, but now you have a new challenge, is how to help teachers do that with fidelity. Yes. And you cannot script culture. Culture is, what are the real rules governing action that are different from these stated rules, right?
Yeah, I really like that.
And that's why the teacher fellowship model helps teachers. We have to kind of win hearts and minds, not just give them a checklist.